Hi, Joanne.
For some reason, my laptop won't let me update Zoom, so I can't get on the right way. So I'm so sorry. I've been here waiting all along.
That's totally fine. That's great. Okay, so we're gonna get started. Pardon me?
I said, were you guys wondering where I was?
I totally was.
Okay.
Yeah.
No,
I was about to send you a message to make sure you were okay.
I'm okay.
Okay, so I'm going to kick this off and also do a little bit of housekeeping to ensure that this remains a safe space for all of us. So I am Humera Ahmed, everyone. I am the host today. I'm the founder and CEO of Locelle, which is a platform to easily connect women with each other for support and mentorship. And we are doing this because we know what's been happening since, the brutal murder of George Floyd. And since then, there's been a movement started. And I noticed with our company, with other fellow founders, and with so many people, we have this, hashtag Blackout Tuesday, and we all put, our social media was muted. And then it just made me think of this is great. But is this a one-day thing, or is it a one-week thing, or what do we do about it? Because we cannot stay silent, because silence, again, it's really taking the side of racism. And so we wanted to do something about that. And again, in our style of bringing people together and really listen, because this is the one thing we really need to be doing at this time. So we want to have these discussions and shared experiences to hear how it's affected you, but also an opportunity for us all to learn, hear, and reflect on how we can continue to show up actively against racism. I do also want to highlight and share what this event is and what it's not. So this is not an event where we are going to be looking at panelists to share resources and all this stuff, because we all know Dr. Google. We can all research and find out what books to read, what to do. This is a space where we really want to hear of experiences and have a moment of reflection. And just have really raw conversation. So if this is all great, let's get started. I would welcome again, Christy, Micah, so sweet, my goodness, Elaine and Joanne. I would love for all of you to introduce yourselves, who you are, and what you do.
Who's going first?
Whoever.
I'll go first. I was last. I kept everybody waiting. So my name is Joanne Brathwaite. I'm the founder of Bang Resume Works, which is a career strategist company for mainly women. In my spare time, I'm also a copywriter, and I like to write about issues that pertain to work and also about human rights and civil issues.
Amazing.
I'll go next. I'm Elaine Bailey. I'm the founder of Uplevel People Partners and the newly launched Uplevel Leadership Academy. Who I am in the world is somebody who is always oriented from my authentic power. And so this is an opportunity in the work that I do to support other people to really find their footing and their authenticity. Doesn't matter what color, race, background. So I hope to share some of my experiences around that today.
Thank you so much. Christy?
Hi, I'm Christy, or CJ, and this is my daughter, Micah. We are a transracial family, and I am also an entrepreneur with a sales and marketing background, design background, and I am also a mindset coach.
Amazing. So amazing. Thank you so much. And Micah, you are precious. So let's get started into our questions. We're going to have about 45 minutes for questions that we have for panelists, and then we'll do the rest of the time Q&A from the audience members. So the first question I have for all of you is that because so much has happened in the last few weeks, especially, we just want to hear how you are feeling as individuals. Christy, you with, having, this beautiful child, Micah, and both you, Elaine, and I was going to say Dahlia, but it's Joanne and Joanne. You've been through a lot. So yeah, let's just hear how you're feeling.
I am feeling better this week, but I think overall, the feelings of a lingering heaviness are still here, because there are other things that are happening surrounding this very big revolution, if I may. And so every day, which is a good thing, because it's not necessarily that you want it to fizzle out of the news cycle either, but it just feels like every day there's yet another thing to consider and to take in. So I've limited myself from how much I consume, but also I feel, and I have felt, supported largely by all of my friends, all of my peers and colleagues who reached out to me from the time everything happened until now, just to make sure I'm okay. And I think that's gone a long way into helping me feel less alone, less angry, less unable to, speak my piece, vent, or just lament. So it's been good. I feel okay.
Thank you so much for sharing that. Elaine, how do you feel? Or Christy?
Yeah, it's it's waves of feeling and emotion, and I'm someone who orients toward hope and optimism by default. It's hard for me to feel down or depressed for very long. But a lot of that sort of hope and optimism that I was feeling in the beginning was because I was like, yeah, I really haven't grounded myself in what's going on. So honestly, I feel anger, I feel rage at like how often, how long does this, and I mean, and it has such deep roots, like hundreds of years. And I get, I was talking to a colleague yesterday who reached out to me and said, what can we do? And I said, just by the way, like, I'm okay with having conversations, but a lot of people in the Black community are just tired of educating others, because for us, it's been our whole lives. And as people are now kind of having this awakening, it's like rush to like, oh, what can we do? But it's like, this is an hour long, this has been going on for an hour, and we've been in here fighting for 59 minutes. And you come in at the 59th minute going, hey, what can we do? So just be aware that there are a lot of people who are feeling that exhaustion. For me, I'm feeling this range of anger is starting to subside, and back in its place now is optimism, but eyes wide open, right? And part of the way that I've been noticing for myself is over the weekend, just really allowing myself to take it in and to see all of the flavors. And of course, much of that comes through mass media. Yeah. But just to take in all of the flavors of what's going on. And by the end of the weekend, I was so heavy, I could barely walk. It was just it had just so overwhelmed me. And, I spent 5 minutes outside in nature and I could feel the shift. So, there's a lot of emotion. And one of the things I'm learning for myself is just how important it is to lean into self-care in various forms. But not to shy away from the difficulty and the discomfort, to stay in it.
Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Again, this brings back the point of like emotional labor. We don't want you to further have this emotional labor. Okay, great. Now we have to educate well-intentioned, well-meaning people, but still,
yeah.
So yeah, it's definitely a lot. CJ, share with us how you have been feeling.
Okay. So sorry, I'm just like dealing with this.
This is great. This is great.
Yeah, so it's been interesting for me, to be honest. I knew that this storm was coming. Obviously, racism is not a new issue, and it's something I've made myself aware of for the last, I've tried to make myself aware of for my whole life, but like certainly in the last decade, I'd say I've really been making a conscious effort to learn as much as I can, and to try and think of things not through my own lens, but to try and put, as best as I can, put myself in other people's shoes about what that emotional labor might feel like. And last week I struggled because it was the first time that something had reached such a boiling point that I was looking at my two daughters who both came from the same uterus and might experience people treating them differently.
Yeah.
And it's just so, and it was just overwhelming. And then also seeing people who I considered to be friends or even people in my family sharing their ideas that were racist and being in complete denial and having big reactions with their own white fragility around me calling them out on that and trying to help them. I'm actually sharing in a loving way. I really tried not to come at people in an angry way. I'm in marketing, so even though I was feeling angry, I tried really hard to use my mindset work and my marketing expertise and try to like sell people on their own ignorance, I guess, which is a hard thing to do because people don't always want to look in the mirror and see that they're part of the problem. So I guess I've tried very hard to shift my mindset towards one of being hopeful and trying to have a positive attitude for the future so that I can be of service in a way that can be received. And some moments are better than others in how I am presenting myself with those intentions.
Yeah, it would be definitely really hard to have, I have two daughters too, and to see people treating them differently. Yeah, it would be really heartbreaking. So thank you for sharing that. I would love to hear of a story from both you, Elaine and Joanne, or an experience with us where you were judged based on skin color, like visibly judged.
Elaine can go first. I'm trying to figure out what.
Okay, so straight up, I struggle with an answer to this question, to be honest.
Yeah.
And here's why. I grew up in Winnipeg and was there until I was 20 years old. So all of my like high school years and what have you. And I didn't even know how to answer this question. And somebody from my high school posted online last night saying how grateful he was for the neighborhood that we grew up in because it was such a melting pot. Like, so there was such a mix and integration that it wasn't an issue. Not from my perspective. I never felt discriminated against. And I made a decision because my mother and father were from the old country. They came from Jamaica. My mother used to like, oh, you know, this person, because of your color, they might do this, they might do that. So I had that kind of influence growing up to kind of protect myself because of my color. And I rejected it. I was like, we're all human beings, that I'm going to make a choice that's not how I'm going to orient. So I have literally gone through my life making an active choice that if you are making decisions about me based on the color of my skin, that's on you. And it's actually none of my business. So I don't doubt that I've missed out on opportunities, jobs, relationships, like all of it. But I haven't been keeping count. I haven't been paying attention and I haven't been letting it define me because as I say so often, it's like, if I live there, I'll die there. If I go to those experiences and let that define me, it will keep me in a box. Long after you take off the chains of enslavement, I'll be enslaved up here. So it's just not how I live. And I am hard pressed to give you a specific example because I don't doubt it's happened. I haven't kept it in my repository.
That's an amazing, that is really deep. I mean, it's interesting. I cannot understand a lot of things and I'm sure a lot of us can't. But even when you shared that, growing up, you were almost prepared that this is the world you're going to grow into. Can I ask a follow-up question on that? So at the time, when you are being, as a child especially, or growing up and you're being shared these types of things, I'm sure you wondered, like, why? Why does it matter?
Yeah.
Can you hear something around that?
Yeah, it's and I think and I am so grateful for that experience, because I'm 50 years old and I can totally tie it back to the woman I am today, and the reason I do the work that I do, because I had those influences as a child. So it wasn't because I was subjected to racism. It was because I could hear, sort of the inner thinkings of the people around me who felt victimized and felt like they had to protect themselves from that. And then I felt like I could make a choice. Is that how I wanted to live and orient? So, you know, yeah, I mean, I don't want to take up too much of the space,
No, thank you so much.
but that's really, I guess I had enough of an awareness to step back from it and say, okay, that's one perspective. Which perspective do I choose?
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is amazing. I feel like we really need to reflect on that too after and think about that. Joanne,
Hi.
I'd love to hear from you.
In my experience growing up in Toronto, which was a very multicultural upbringing, I think my experience differs a lot from Elaine's, just based on sometimes prejudices and biases come from a collective of people. When I've been the one person in a situation, people didn't seem as threatened or as curious or as discriminating. But as soon as you bring together a number of Caribbean or African, Latino, anyone who could be deemed as other, I think sometimes people's perceptions go into, oh, well, I've heard these people are such, or I dealt with one person like that, so all of this collective minority must be the same way. So my experiences based on skin color started in nursery school. And I think about the area in which I grew up, there was our building, and then just down the street was subsidized housing where a lot of immigrants tend to live. And so the perceptions about me, and I mean, I'm like 5 or 6, as compared to the people who lived in the housing projects, for me, I looked at it as, well, we're all the same. We're all brown. Why are you treating these people differently as opposed to me, or even sometimes lumping us all together? What was that about? So, it comes from I used to get a $2 allowance when I was a kid. And there was a variety store just across the street. So my dad would walk me over to the variety store on Fridays. I got $2 and I could buy whatever I wanted. And then when I got older and the allowance got a little more, I was still allowed to go, but he didn't have to walk me. And I remember being followed in the store, even though I'd been there like so many other times, being followed in the store. And that was the first time, maybe around 8 or 9, where I was like, things are weird. And it would be people questioning me about things that they didn't question other people, like, is your mother's husband your father? Because they have perceptions of how Caribbean people grow up. Or being in 5th grade and knowing since I was 4 that I wanted to be a writer, being in 5th grade and writing the story that apparently blew my teacher's mind so much she thought somebody else had written it. Going into grade 11, switching high schools, I went from a standard high school to an academy. And going in with, average to high average marks, B's and A's and B's, maybe a C in history, but being asked by the guidance counselor, why did I want to take advanced history and advanced law when I was in grade 11? And perhaps I might want to focus on something like phys ed, something that might be easier for me, because why? I've been a solid BA student all my life. Why suddenly do I need things easier? At that same high school, that particular year, there was an influx of minority students. And just remembering, like at lunchtime, all of the lunch monitors would stand within, 20-foot radius of our lunch table, while all of the other kids on the other side of the couch were free to go and get rowdy and do all the things that teenagers do. And we always just felt like we were scrutinized. I mean, I moved to Montreal, and if you're familiar with Montreal at all, you know how notoriously segregated and racist it can be. Trying to find an apartment, trying to get to work. People would see me in my area. I lived in Westmount and wanted to know what I was doing there, where I was going. Why was I there? Well, I live here. How do you live here? You know, so I think there are so many experiences that it's just become so ingrained as part of my day that I'm going to run into somebody who doesn't think that I'm deserving of or worthy of just because of this. But to supplement what Elaine was saying and where I started with the story, I used to date a guy who lived up in Wawa, which is about 12 hours north from Toronto. And I was nervous because I knew that I was going to be one of the only, if not the only Black person. And got up there, and the reception that I received was, to this day, I still don't have words for it. And everybody in their well-intentioned way would say, well, you know, I don't understand why you being here is such a big deal because I don't see race. And I think that well-intentioned people, because it doesn't just happen with white people, but well-intentioned people believe that if they discount the fact that I'm Black, and I don't mind being described as Black, but if they discount the fact that I'm Black, then that makes them not racist. So for me, you know, that question, I could be here for hours just giving you examples of microaggressions and macroaggressions. It's a daily aspect of being a Black woman in Toronto for me. So very different, all the way from dating to working to just walking down the street. So it's a very different experience for me.
Yeah. My heart feels really heavy just because hearing all these real stories and real experiences, there's a lot that just is not right. But like you said, you know, all these microaggressions, and I also feel like a lot of this stuff is so hard to spot, really hard to spot, because even within us, but even well-intentioned people, like, we don't know what to say. So it's like, if I don't see race, maybe I do see race, but I want to treat you equally, right? But it could also be that, I don't know. It's such a complex topic that's how I see it, right? If I ever say, well, I treat everyone equally, I mean, we all have our own internal biases. We don't, which is true. So
and that's what I was going to say. It's like the one thing, sorry, Humera.
No, totally. That's
something
exactly what I was saying. I would love to hear your thoughts, because we can't.
I'm shaking for some reason. I think in this whole situation, what everyone needs to realize is that we all have biases. We all have prejudices. Yeah. And we have to recognize where they come from. And even the well-intentioned statements, you know, oh, you dance so well, I'm sure you have great rhythm, or you're so articulate, or, oh, look, I got a tan, I'm almost as dark as you, like all of those things.
Wow.
Are microaggressions, and they're based on biases and prejudices and things that, you know, we may have picked up consciously and subconsciously from media, right? And even the questions out of earnest curiosity, check yourself. Right? If someone were to flip that and ask you something, how would you feel about that? So, you know, it's, we all have them. It doesn't matter how much you love people. It doesn't matter how friendly you are. We all have biases. We all have prejudices. And I think that is the first step toward really understanding where all of this is coming from and how all of this exists, because we've all got them. And it doesn't matter, you have friends of all colors, there's still something that you think about that group or that particular culture, and whatever it is, we need to check ourselves. And I think sorry, I just
no, this is so good.
That's where it starts for me.
And this is exactly why we're doing this, because it's so true. Because when you were saying that, I was really trying to reflect on times, and it's like, even though I go into, say, an event and I think I'm going to treat everyone equally, I still have to be mindful of that, because I look at you and I go, oh, she's Black. Even though I'm not saying anything, I'm thinking in my head, she's Black. How do I talk to her so that she feels equally treated? This is just raw, right? This is what I as a person think. And so you're right, because I think we have to acknowledge that, because we all have it, no matter what our intentions are. And that is the first step. This is great. I kind of want to have a follow-up conversation on that. But let's hear from you. This is so great, so deep. I love this. Thank you for sharing, Joanne. This is really something we should all think about. Christy, you shared that you did have a moment where you felt that your kids were going to be treated differently. Can you share more about that, an experience where you really felt, oh my gosh, my kids are going to be treated like unfairly or differently?
Yeah, well, like I said, through my adoption process, there's training specifically on these kinds of issues. I was in an international adoption process, so I wasn't sure which country I would be adopting from, but I knew that it was not going to be Canada, and I knew that the child was not going to be white. And so I started from that place and learning, and it's just been the most amazing gift as well. Micah, like I said, was conceived with donor sperm from an amazing man whose name I do not know, because he's an anonymous donor, but he has an open ID. And that means that when Micah's 18 years old, she has the opportunity to find out his name if she would like to. And she has the opportunity to connect with him. And he's very open to connection. And because of him being an open ID, one of the most amazing gifts that I wasn't even aware that I would be receiving along with this amazing gift of having a baby, was the gift of community in all of the other parents who also used the same donor sperm. We are all connected now. And let me tell you, I only got connected with them in December, so it's been 6 months. Micah's only 10 months old. My perspective is changing every single time we talk, because I love these people now. Their children feel like an extension of my family. So when they're telling me their experiences, a lot of them live in the States. So, a lot of them are dealing with, all the stuff in a real, like, in your face way. It's different from in Canada, where we're watching on the news and thinking, wow. No, my friends were sharing with me that, they were driving with their baby the other day, and these friends are Black, so their child is also Black, rather than biracial, like our family. But so they were saying they were driving along, and the other parent was driving, and they said, slow down a little bit, because with everything going on right now, we don't need an excuse to get pulled over. And they're concerned for their lives. And it broke me up, because I just thought, I have never ever been concerned for my life by being pulled over. I've been concerned about getting a speeding ticket. I've been concerned about potentially having an accident and having a vehicle collision that could harm me. I have never thought that because I was driving 2 or 3 kilometers over, that would give somebody with prejudice a reason to hurt me. And I just thought, God, they're dealing with this emotional labor every single time they get in the car to go to work, to go get groceries. They live in a part of the States that's maybe not the most progressive when it comes to these issues. And so there's times they're describing where they're in rural areas, and they said that they call a friend to have somebody else on the line. Sometimes they've even been just talking to me on a video chat service while they're through, and said, oh yeah, we got the phone on now because we're in an area where they don't like Black people. And I just thought, like, I've never really, I've traveled, so I've been in other countries, of course, and I can relate to that feeling of being like, everybody's looking at me because I'm the white person here in India or in Africa. two places that I've been where that difference was really brought to my attention. Like when I was in Africa, little kids were running away crying because they thought I was a ghost. They'd never seen anybody that looked like me before.
What?
You know, and so I can experience it on that level, but it's not the same as experiencing it at home every single moment. You know, regular moments that people that have white privilege just take for granted, don't think twice about it. You know, so that has definitely been, you know, on my mind. Just how are these, like, I've never gone to a networking event, for example, and had somebody say to me, so where are you from? And me be like, oh yeah, like I grew up in Prince Rupert. And then them be like, no, but I mean, where are you from?
Yeah.
Like, I've never had that happen to me, yet my friends are telling me that that is quite common, you know. And as somebody who has experienced the privilege of not being asked those kinds of awkward and intrusive questions and racial bias questions, I didn't even realize how much that would have affected like my energy at that networking event. If somebody asked me that and it kind of threw me off my pitch, how does that affect my sales?
Yeah.
This stuff it's covert, and it's ingrained in all of these normal everyday experiences. It's easy to see something on the news and call it out as being overtly racist, but I think that we have to do a much better job at finding all of the covert ways that this is showing up in people's everyday lives and stopping them.
Yeah, it's definitely a lot. And, you know, I come from Pakistan, but, you know, I also grew up in a really privileged society, even there. I have faced racism, but not, you know, not to any extent where it's like, oh, you know, this is a problem. So this is definitely a huge learning opportunity for us, and do better, like really do better. I would love to ask Elaine and Joanne how you deal with this racism in the workplace. I mean, I have this word subtle racism, but as we are hearing, it cannot be so subtle as well. So how do you navigate that?
Joanne, I'll go first again, and I'll leave more space for you, because again, you know, I'm really grappling with this, and I really don't want to leave anybody with, like, I've made the commitment to get my head out of the sand. But just for perspective, I did some research on this on the weekend, and that from the 2016 or 2017 last census numbers, Canada, BC has 1%. 1% of the population in BC is Black, and something like 3.5% in Canada. It's like minuscule. And when growing up in Winnipeg, I never would have known that it was that low. I certainly feel that here in Vancouver. But again, I just take a different path. For me, it shows up like, you know, Joanne, when you mentioned you're so articulate, that used to plague me in my 20s, and I'm like, what does that mean?
What does it mean?
Like, am I so articulate for a Black person? Is that what you're saying? Right. So this was long before we had a label of microaggression, or the people who like want to show me they're down, so they call me girl. You know, it's like, oh, you're talking to someone next to you and you don't use girl, but you talk to me and you're like, girl, you know, whatever. It's like, oh yeah, you're down. But again, it's just, so two things. Like, you think about the heaviness that you're feeling in this conversation, and you think about like each of you on the call wanting to make sure that you are awake, and you know that you really are proactively using your life and your leadership in a way that respects all human beings. But I don't want to leave you with the burden of like, I have to check myself at every single moment. It is a learning and growing experience. It is like, where do my prejudices show up? Where do my biases show up? And of course, because they're unconscious, they're in your blind spot. You don't know they're there, and sometimes until somebody reveals it to you. So being curious and open to feedback and all of that. But I don't want you to get so awkward in yourself, because all we're doing is exacerbating the issue. Like, okay, like Humera, what you said was perfect. Like I'm at a networking event and I want to be inclusive and there's a Black person. Suddenly you're not Humera, be your authentic self, right? And if it comes out awkward, I will give you the grace. So that's how I roll. Now, that doesn't excuse us from continuing on with, oh, you know, what are the statements I'm making in my head when I'm driving down the street and I see a particular kind of driver that for me, I've put into a group. So then that's where I check myself, but not to the point where I'm going to be debilitated in interfacing and interacting and engaging with. So like this conversation, it's like, you know what? When I'm not living in scarcity and fear, I'm generous, I'm loving, I'm compassionate, and I am that way with everybody, regardless of who they are. There are 3 people, maybe 4 on this call today who, gentlemen who were clients of mine in my previous role. I'm calling you gentlemen out. And I remember, and I'm going to share this with you. I remember when I was first introduced to the owner of the business and I thought, why would they match me with this guy? Like we're polar opposites. And so I already went in thinking, we're just different. Are we going to get along? And they ended up being my most favorite clients, and it had nothing to do, but that was my own bias. That was me putting my own bias in the way, saying, gosh, we look different. And normally I say I don't operate that way, but I do. So being able to see myself in that, but not to the point where it stops you from living and stops you from connecting with other human beings. And look, for this next little while, everything, I mean, I've seen companies who are putting out statements and I'm like, well, that's great. And meanwhile, you know, the other 70 or 80% of their population has lambasted them for that message. Or I see something that really irks me and pisses me off, but other people are like, great, good for you. So there are so many ways to fail at this right now. And if we get on a podium of like, it has to look and be a certain way, we're just not going to move from this point. And we're going to end up spiraling in our own fear of getting it wrong. So just me personally, I'm okay with you getting it wrong as long as you cop to it. And I was the same way when the Me Too movement happened. And I worked for an organization that decided for the very first time we needed a policy on sexual harassment, even though these were some of the most heart-centered men I'd ever worked with. And there we were in this group of 150 people, hand-wringing our way through how do we create our first HR policy around sexual harassment. And I stood up and I said, this is going to be controversial, but I don't want some policy to tell me how to relate to my fellow human beings. So that's where I orient from. I know that these things happen. And I guess I have a choice in the moment. Do I stop and educate or correct you? Do I ask you to check yourself? Like, where did that language come from in this moment? For me right now, I'm more like, I keep moving. Let the wind, you know, the wind at my back hit you. It's like, if you're stuck there, then you're stuck there. If you want to move forward, I got some ideas of how we can do that. And it has nothing to do with race. But that, you know, again, that's just how I roll. And because of that, I feel like I now have the energy to move through this without, you know, we're not just talking, you know, we're talking 3.5 years of Trump. We're talking a pandemic. We're talking, you know, racism that has been going on for hundreds of years, you know, escalating to a point at this level. We're talking an economic recession. We're talking women being left behind. We're talking marriages being broken up because people are now locked in quarters where they can't, you know. So this is, you know, a maelstrom, but I get to wake up every day. I'm not depressed. The sadness is there deep in my heart and it's not taking me out. And that's because I've made a choice. Like if I compile all of those microaggressions, it now becomes my problem. It happened 15 minutes ago and I'm still carrying it. It happened 5 years ago and I'm still carrying it. I got no energy then left to be the kind of leader I want to be in the world. So that's just the choice I've made. And I don't want to take anything away from anybody else's experience about how you navigate through this. It is very personal. So I'm not taking away from anybody else's experience. It's just a choice I've made. And I get up every day and I make the same choice.
Wow. This is so interesting. I really appreciate you sharing that. But I also, at one point you did share that you don't want other people to feel the burden, like to constantly check. Why not though? Why not? This is a time that I'm just curious out of curiosity, because I know I had a conversation with an amazing friend of mine recently. And I was actually nervous about doing this session because, I am not Black. I have had, white privilege, even though I'm not white because of my skin color. But I was really nervous because I can talk about women stuff. That's what I do. I am a woman. I can relate. I can't not relate on this end, but I also know we're all going to make mistakes. So this was an opportunity for me to make mistakes. And I may be saying things that are not right. And that, you know what, though, like I'm here to listen and learn.
Yes.
But why not though? Like, why should, because you've had to, or just Black people in general.
Yeah.
You still to date have to check yourself, be mindful of little things. So why shouldn't we check ourselves with our thoughts? Anyway, this is not, I know it's a bit of a loaded question, but
not to the point where it stops you from taking action.
Yes.
Right. Yeah. That's what I'm saying. You
Absolutely.
still hosted this call. You took the feelings that you were feeling and the awkwardness, and I might not say it right. And you came forward to have the conversation, to host the conversation. Right. And you're sharing openly and vulnerably about what it's like behind the scenes. It's all good. That's all part of our humanity.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Joanne.
Hi. Well, the original question was how to deal with subtle
racism in the workplace.
And to piggyback on Elaine, I think there's a choice you make about how things are going to affect you. And you can either be a sponge where you absorb all of the hostility, all of the abuse, or you can be a shield and let it all bounce off. Some days and some spaces are easier than others to deal with, because I'm going to be frank, there are times that people have said things to me that I've let slide because I like them and because they're friends, even though we are coworkers. And there are other times where you work in environments and anything and everything will get your back up. So it's also situational. But the one thing I would also like to add, because we have myself and Elaine here today, which really highlights this point, and that not all similar Black people have the same lived experience, right? And having Elaine here is a really good example of that. We're both Black, we're both female, we both accomplish certain things, we're both very well spoken, and we are here today to help you have the uncomfortable conversations. But, my growing up in Toronto and Elaine growing up in Winnipeg, you can see right away how different our experiences are. And I think sometimes too, like I stated earlier, when you have one person and then you have a collective, the perceptions about you become very different. So to that end, I think it's a key to use when you're navigating a workspace, or even just your day-to-day life. Like I said, we all have our biases, we all have our prejudices, and that's just a matter of fact. But also realize that when you're doing that thing where you're like, oh, you're Black and you're Black, maybe you should be friends, or you're brown and you're brown, maybe you guys will get along. Those types of things are the same kind, just in a smaller envelope, the same kind of racism, the same kind of discrimination, even though it's well-intentioned and positive. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's something.
Yeah, it's so interesting. I went to York University in Toronto to school, and one of my friends, I'm from Muslim background, and my friend also Muslim, but she wears hijab. So she's visibly Muslim. And I remember in one of our classes, the professor asked a question. I was very outspoken about my experiences. So I was sharing something, and she came to me after. She was outraged. She didn't say anything at that time, but she was outraged because she said, "You are painting us in a bad light. I mean, you don't wear hijab. You don't, you're not that person. And you're also now sharing all these things that are not my experiences." But it was so that is where I was like, wow. I don't want to go off tangent, but it was just really where you shared, you may be from, you may have the same skin color. You may come from maybe even similar backgrounds, but you will still have different lived experiences. And that should not reflect upon as a collective, on certain types of races. Wow. Or just even ethnicities. It's so interesting. So how do you navigate though, Joanne? What do you like? Do you?
For me, it's in workspaces. It's also been an interesting experience for me. My mother worked at one of the civic centers in Toronto at the time when we were all divided into different boroughs, and she was the only Black person working in the planning department, handling the zoning and all of the bylaws. And a lot of people didn't believe that she was working where she was working. They thought she was, back in the day when it was the secretary, the one who got you, your coffee and typed your little notes and ran your errands, and didn't believe that she had a place in her field, in her industry. And the one thing that she always told me from the time I was small is that you are going to be working in a white person's world, and you are going to have to learn how to work with white people. And you are going to have to learn how to stand up for yourself and understand when something is personal and when something is racial. And as an aside to that, I know that growing up very quickly, you develop a sixth sense for people who are looking at you through a certain colored lens. And it's those perceived and very subtle, but they're there. Those are the experiences that we're taught as Black people to be mindful of and to watch. And when they occur, it's usually just a look between two people who share the same skin. It's like, did you see that? I saw that. Okay, you saw that. So, there are a number of ways, but my mom told me to always be mindful that I was working in a white space. So I got very used to being very open about who I am and calling out people who might have said something that I either didn't like or that was really uncool. So my experience in working is that in the beginning, somebody will always see me as militant, and the same thing has been said to me so often. It's like, oh, Joanne, you come in here and you're all Black girl this and Black power that, and I didn't like you very much. And I'd always say to them, do you like me now? Like, yeah, I love you now. I said, so what's changed? Because it hasn't been me. Like I'm Black every day. I'm Black till I die. And it's not something that I'm going to throw in your face, but it's who I am. And if you're uncomfortable with that, then that's on you, because I can't change it.
Yeah.
By the fact that I exist and breathe. My Blackness is here. And if I make mention of it once in a while, if you're uncomfortable with it, that's something that you need to check, because you know what? I'm the only person in an organization of 500 white people. The person who should be uncomfortable is me.
Yeah.
So, I navigate it by speaking up. I'm not always the most popular, but I'm always the most honest, and you'll always know where I'm coming from and how I feel. So
that's my people. I love it. Christy, how do you prepare your kids to navigate racism in school as they grow up? Because Maggie, is visibly white and Micah is not. You're on mute. Yes.
Yeah, thanks. It's tough. my starting point was to reach out to other moms that I knew that had husbands who were Black and had biracial children with them. And I asked them what their children's experiences were, because their children had the advantage of age. They were in the school system already. So I wanted to find out what's actually happening in the place where I live. And not surprisingly, there was racism. She shared with me that there's stuff happening not just from, you know, white people directed at her children, but from all different types of ethnicities, and even within the Black community, there can be different skin tones and different prejudices that can come up from what I've learned speaking to some of my friends. So, of course, my hope is that things continue to get better and that these things start being spoken about in a healing and supportive way in the school system, so that these conversations are being addressed from a solution standpoint rather than, you know, kids being educated at all different places in their communities and at home, and then coming together and sharing that education together without any leadership from the school in how we talk about these kinds of issues. However, I can't control per se how the school system is going to decide to move forward with this. What I can try to influence is my own children. So there's no room for racism in our home. Obviously, we're very anti-racist in our home. And when I catch myself doing something out of ignorance, I am honest about it. And sometimes I even share about my mistake, because we can't be afraid to make those kinds of mistakes. If we want to be an advocate, sometimes we're not going to advocate perfectly. And the other thing is, I'm trying really hard to, I guess this is part of the reason why I became a mindset coach, to be honest, is I really want to be able to send these kids out into the world with a bulletproof attitude, a mindset that can act as a shield for them, and also help send them out in the world shining their light on these issues, and walking into a room where other people might not share their perspectives, and being confident enough with themselves to address it. Like, be a strong woman, talk to somebody, call them out on their stuff. Doesn't matter that you're only 5 years old. If you're at the class and you hear somebody do something that's wrong, tell them that that's wrong. You know, be supportive and stand behind your values. And then just trying really hard to incorporate in very age appropriate ways. My children are obviously quite young, but we buy all kinds of books that have heroes in them that are you know, all different colors, but I consciously try to find children's books with Black heroes in it. We have one on Maya Angelou. We have one on, I pronounced that incorrectly, but we have 5-minute stories from Fearless Girls that have some great stories in there. We have like a dozen, and I can't even think of them all off the top of my head, but reading those over and over and over again, making sure that also I did an experiment or exercise while I was in the adoption education program. And they gave us like a little body outline, and they gave us the thing of colors, and they said, just pick like whatever color to represent, you know, the color of your dentist and your lawyer and your doctor and your, you know, teachers growing up and your family, okay, and your friend network. And I had like the smallest amount of diversity unconsciously. I had not been like running around my life trying, okay, where's the people that look exactly like me to call into my, no. Well, for starters, statistically in Canada, you know, there's less people here that are Black specifically. So that's, you know, it's difficult to find a Black doctor in Victoria, I learned, because I tried to find one after I had this conversation. I'm like, okay, we need to redesign this body, and it can be challenging. So it's like, okay, well, so how do I do this now? You know, I've been asking some friends of mine, like, would you consider being, you know, a fun uncle for Micah, so that she can hang out with you sometimes, and go take her out with your boys and have a nice time together. you know, because one of my friends has offered to do that with her. I am also open to guidance on this issue because I try so hard to anticipate what might be coming and try to prepare myself and my kids for this, but like, ugh, it's hard.
Yeah.
It's very hard to know what's to discern what the right path might look like. So
If I may, just for a second, Christy, sorry, Humera.
No, for sure.
I really appreciate, Christy, the fact that you were trying to educate and prepare your children for a future as racialized beings. And I hope that you continue working with people who have lived experience. I know that goes contrary to what I just said about not everybody having the same experience, but I really think in your case, the intentions are there. You are never really going to be able to articulate to your kids what they need to look out for, how it's going to be based on the color of their skin. As you were talking, my daughter is also biracial, if I may just interject with that. But my daughter looks white. So one of the issues I have is when we're out in public and she starts a fuss, how do I discipline her without making it look like I'm some crazy Black lady trying to kidnap this little white kid?
Yeah.
There is nothing about my daughter. Her hair is straight, her skin is white, her hair is brown. She gets mistaken often for Asian and sometimes Southeast Asian, South Asian, just depending on who she's with. She looks Filipino sometimes. But there's a meme going around right now about when is too young to talk to your children about race. And some people feel that 5 or 6 is a little too young. But for Black parents, it's very much a reality of helping your children prepare. And things that you as a white parent might not even realize are happening to your kids. And it starts early. It starts young. It starts early. It's subtle and sometimes it's aggressive. And that might not be your experience. Your kids may grow up and have a very positive experience like Elaine. But there will be a deficit in your teaching. And I really hope that you make the effort to fill that deficit at all stages of your kids' lives, because there will come a point, maybe the childhood is without problem, but they're out one night and something happens and they get stopped by the police, you know, or what to do when they start getting followed around in a store, or what to do when someone drops the N-bomb, you know, and how to deal with those feelings and how to process, and then think about the day your children might have the feeling that they're not like mommy and they need to figure out who they are, and that might mean pushing away part of themselves. We have in my family a number of children who are adopted who identify with one side as opposed to the other. So there are a lot of things that come with living in a certain skin.
Mm-hmm.
thank you so much for sharing that.
I'll just add to that quickly. I know we're almost at the top of the hour. I also have a biracial son. He just turned 18 about 2-3 weeks ago. And you know, you'll notice a theme for me, and what I invested in with him was, you know, who I am as well. Him knowing himself authentically, knowing his power in the world. He looks more white than Black, other than he has curly hair, and so people will come up to him and, you know, pat his hair and that kind of stuff. So now he knows how to stand in that conversation. I also made the decision to homeschool him, not because of race, but because I am so committed to my values that I'm like, I want my son to grow up having a very strong social, emotional backing. And from there, once he knows that, he can figure out the academics. So he started public school when he was 16 years old. He's now a straight A student and is going on to be an astrophysicist. And he does not
amazing.
come home asking about, he educates me. You know, he's taken me through an education on his relationship with the N-word and research that he did to decide for himself where he stands on that. So I would say that's, you know, the most important thing you can do, as any parent can do, is raise your child to be authentic and strong. And there's always going to be gaps. Doesn't matter what race you are. There is no playbook for parenthood.
Mm-hmm.
So we always get it wrong. There's always something we miss. But I too applaud what you're doing to go that extra mile to make sure that your daughters are surrounded by diverse perspectives and really get a sense of their culture.
Thank you so much. I want to say as well that I became acutely aware the day within hours of Micah's birth that she would be facing racism, because Micah was born at home. And so within just a few hours of her birth, some family came over to meet her. And I handed her to a member of my family, and of course they're overjoyed. And they looked at her and said, "Oh, she's Black." I hadn't shared with them all the details on the donor that I chose ahead of time, because I knew that that's what they would focus on. And the moment that she was held, that's the first thing. It was the first thing. And that's been hard, because this is family. I love my family, and I do not love the way that they engage in this issue. I do not like their, and for them, it's an unconscious place. They didn't even think that, like, they didn't walk into the room to meet my oldest daughter and say anything like that. "Oh, she's Métis," or "Oh, she has red hair," or like, not like, it wasn't. So yes, this is something that I am just continuing to lean into and like look at and educate myself, and then ask for support when I need to actually also hear things from real people who can share really intimate experiences where they have also experienced these things, and how they've chosen to work through that. So I really value all of these conversations that we're having here today. Thank you. Really
Thank you so much. I mean, in a traditional networking style, our events always go over time, but it is really important. It just means that these conversations that are deep, that are meaningful, and they're unscripted, raw, like, need to have had. So we did have a few questions on our end, but we're totally running out of time. But I definitely do want to ask one question, and that is, a lot of people do truly want to support, you know, and beyond the research that we can do ourselves, beyond the education that we give to ourselves, what are some of the best ways we can show our support as a society? And it may be different to all of you, right? But if you could just share at least one way we can show that support and continue to learn, that would be really, really helpful.
Oh my goodness, there are so many ways. I think one of the things that I've been telling people is start believing the stories. When people tell you that things have happened to them based on skin tone, believe them, and don't follow with a but. You know, don't say, "Well, I'm sure it was horrible for you, but," or, you know, asking somebody, "Well, are you sure?" You know, when you've had decades of living in your skin, you start to understand and know when things are about race. So believe your peers, your friends, your neighbors. Don't automatically assume that there's a but, that there's a flip side. It's an experience that somebody, a racialized person, is having, and it's an experience that you'll probably never have. So believe them when they say that it's happening. Because more often than not, it's the truth and it's happening.
Yeah.
I'll piggyback on that, and I will say, first of all, shore yourself up. Invest in who you are as a human being, as a leader. And I don't care if you're an individual contributor, what your role is at work. shore yourself up as a leader, because you're going to need some backbone. And what I would ask you to do is, a lot of these conversations aren't happening when the person's in the room. So when you're in those private conversations and somebody's making a comment because they feel like they can, you know, it's going to be you to show your leadership in that moment.
Mm-hmm.
So, but you got to do the work for yourself first. You really got to shore yourself up, know what your values are, know where you stand. And it doesn't have to be these big demonstrative actions. It's like day to day, moment to moment. That's where you live.
Yeah.
Yeah, don't make it performative. Just make it happen.
Yeah. Thank you for saying that. Because I know a lot of times people will say, well, we are supposed to be doing this, as opposed to coming from a place of authenticity of like, we really want to influence positive change and not what we're supposed to be seen as or supposed to be doing. Really, really important. CJ?
I think we can't be afraid of offending people who are coming with racist views when we're sharing these things. It can be scary to stand up to someone who you love and respect and tell them that they're wrong. And sometimes it means losing friends, and that's hard. And we can't be afraid of that and let that be the reason why we don't progress as a community.
Yeah. No, for sure. Absolutely. Thank you all for sharing all this. I know we had somebody asked where they can follow you incredible humans together. You know, all these incredible ladies, if that's okay with you. I mean, now you're kind of on the spot, but people can still find you, you know, on whatever method you prefer. We will be following up with you, and then we will share that. You know, we'll just send an email to everyone and with their information, where to find them, where to connect. There you go. CJ's on it. You know, Elaine and Joanne, if you like, you can also enter your own links if you like, but we will still do that. We will also actually set up a page with all these resources that we have collected. And if you, any one of you, have anything to contribute to that, please let us know. Write to us at hello@locelle.com, or just respond to the email that we will be sending out after the event. We would love to just create that library and our own mini Google to support. So thank you again for having these raw conversations. It really felt like I feel heavy, but at the same time, it's so good. It feels so good. It's like, this is what needs to happen. We really need to talk about it. We need to, if we need to make mistakes to learn, we need to do that. So thank you again so much. If you have any final words, please share. Otherwise, yeah, we hope to do more of these types of sessions in the future, for sure. And thank you all for attending.
Thank you for having us, Humira.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Joanne.
Thanks for sharing your stories to my fellow panelists, and thanks for everyone to showing up to the conversation. So awesome. Thanks, Humira, for hosting us.
Of course.
Lovely.
Yes. Thank you. I love you too. Thank you. I love you all.
Thank you so much, Humira. Okay. Thank you for sharing your platform and for leveraging your white privilege to be able to tackle this head on.
Yeah. Yeah.
And for not letting your fear hold you back.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. Okay.
Awesome.
Bye, everyone.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Hey, Selena, you can end the meeting for all.
I just need to stop the recording. So should I press the square button?
Yeah.